Hey everybody, this is Dr. Guy E. White. I am founder of thedissertationmentor.com, and I want to welcome you to this really in-depth look at the dissertation literature review and how can you write a literature review in perhaps a single draft without taking much more than a handful of weeks of your time. That's really the aim of this presentation. So this is going to be an in-depth look at the dissertation literature review and how can you apply the dissertationmentor.com mindset into your work on your literature review in a way that will benefit you. And when we think about the literature review, quite often the reaction is, you want me to write how many pages of this thing? And quite often when dissertation writers, if you've had this experience, you'll totally agree. Quite often what dissertation writers find is that when they write what they call their first draft of their literature review, what they quite often find is that there's information that is being requested of them by their chair afterwards that should have been requested from the get-go. And most dissertation writers say that if they knew the expectations of the literature review beforehand, they feel like they would have a much greater likelihood of producing a quality draft the first time. And a lot of dissertation writers also say that if they just knew how to write a literature review, how to write even the first 3 chapters of their dissertation, then they would be able to actually do it much more quickly and with much less effort, really, in the end. So in general, you might have had the experience of feeling exceedingly capable as a human being, exceedingly capable as a student, yet for some reason, when it comes to this dissertation and writing a literature review, there's this feeling of feeling less than capable. Think for a moment, is that something that you have felt in your doctoral journey or in your writing of the dissertation, where you feel capable in many things, in many areas of your life, but when it comes to this project, it feels for some reason exceptionally difficult and almost hazy, like there's no clear path forward. And specifically, you feel like for something that's been done for so many people, you almost feel like there's not a clear roadmap to go forward. There's no way to actually get ahead in a way that makes complete sense. It's almost like I've bought lots of these dissertation-related books, and I read it, and I kind of get what they're saying, but when I actually sit down to do the writing, something is not clicking. The roadmap is not working for me. So if you had a roadmap, you might feel like, wow, if I just had the right roadmap, then I could actually make progress on this thing. And similarly, you might have felt that this literature review thing is just such a mammoth task. It's one of the most biggest papers perhaps that you've ever written, and it feels as if you just knew what to do, it'd be easier. But right now, it just feels like this gargantuan thing that I'm adding to all the time. And I have to go find things and put this into this document, and yet it still doesn't make sense. You might even say to yourself, I've written 30 pages of this thing, but it still doesn't feel like it's clicking. And have you experienced this thing that if you just felt that if you just knew the steps, if someone just told you the steps, that you could take them and you could actually finish this thing? And that's why you're watching this video. If you're watching this video and you've felt any of those things, then you're in the right place. When you and I are talking in the coming weeks ahead, and if you add your comments to the comment field below, call me Dr. Guy. And this presentation is about how to write the dissertation literature review, and in my opinion, win big, avoid insanity, and be a pro. And I just had to work in some pictures of my kids here. This is on the left here, this is my daughter, Lizzie Snow. And on the right here is my son, Guy the Fifth. And the reason I include them here is whenever I'm approaching any project, there's that reality that I'm spending time away from my family. And even though this project might be one of the top goals in my life, whatever this project is, like a dissertation, it's taking away from those things that are my number ones. For you right now, think about what are your number ones? What are the things that this project is keeping you from, this dissertation project? For me, whenever I'm working with doctoral candidates, whether we're doing a seminar together or whether we're working one-on-one with one another in a coaching relationship, or if I'm, a chair or a committee member of any of my doctoral candidates, for me, what's always on my mind is the number one. Who is your number one? And what is this project preventing you from doing and moving forward in your life? And that's the seriousness that we bring to this presentation today, is that there's so much that is waiting for you out there. And if you just finish this thing, you can make it forward and keep going forward. Because you know that if you did not finish this dissertation project, as much as you could probably carry on and feel just grand about yourself, there'd be just a little piece of you that felt like you didn't get what you wanted. What you want is to finish. And that's what this whole presentation is about. And that's really what the dissertationmentor.com is about. It's about enabling doctoral candidates to finish and providing them a roadmap to move forward. And so that's what we're discussing with you here today. I want to thank you for allowing me the honor of being on your screen right now and allowing me to be someone that would present to you the fact that you're taking the time. It takes personal commitment, what I call wherewithal, like the guts, to actually be someone that actually would watch a video like this. Not many doctoral candidates will spend the time to do something like you're doing right now. And what I want to say is that I'm fully committed to do whatever that I can in this limited time that we have here on this video to give you as much blessed content as I possibly can to make a difference in your doctoral journey. And at the end of this presentation, I'm going to tell you about a kind of a way that we can go forward and we can move ahead with one another and some next steps that you can take. So bear with me here. Just a little bit about me is I've written 3 books, the most recent of which at the time of the recording of this is Building the World's Greatest High School, an awesome book with my co-author. And I run the most comprehensive dissertation training on the web. There's lots of trainings out there, and they're fantastic. There are many of which are fantastic, I should say. But this one is by far the most comprehensive, and if you do a comparison, I hope you'll come to the same conclusion as well. I've served on dozens of dissertation committees as a member of a dissertation committee or as a chair, so I have the practical experience of serving directly with doctoral candidates in those capacities. And when I actually sat down to write my dissertation some time ago, it took less, really when I put my mind to it, really when I started work on it and work on it well, it took me less than 9 months to complete. And what's shocking to most doctoral candidates is the average road. I don't know if there's any research about this, but in my experience, the average road to finish a dissertation without the proper guidance can range from never finishing, but really the average is somewhere around 18 months to 3 years after finishing coursework, meaning that you're totally dedicated to the dissertation project and it takes 18 months to 3 years without the proper guidance. And so my hope here is to provide you some opportunities, some guidance really about how to make waves and to actually make progress fast. And really to set the frame for this, I want to tell you this quick story about myself, which is that for me, I had just finished a master's degree and for various reasons, which I won't get into here, I found myself during most of my free time taking little jaunts through Central and South America. And I was having a grand old time as a single dude out in the middle of nowhere, just enjoying my life. And yet there felt like there was something a little missing, maybe something big missing in my life. And fortunately, through a set of circumstances, I met my beautiful bride, Kristen. And the picture on the right is probably my favorite. Is that these are people throwing the bouquet at her at a wedding. And for me, I feel like so much happened, so much wonderful stuff happened so quickly in my life. And the reality was that I wanted to be with her and be with my new family as much as I possibly could. But the reality was that I had other responsibilities. We we got married, and we had an amazing wedding, and we were living in that kind of that early marital bliss of hanging out with one another and enjoying just the new possibilities of what could we build with one another in our lives. And it's like standing at the threshold of possibility. I mean, think about it. Like, if anything was possible and you were done with your doctoral journey, what would happen? What would happen if you were quickly able to move on and move forward in your doctoral journey? Like me and my wife, we got married, and there was all these possibilities that were present there because we had gotten married. And similarly, if you were to finish your dissertation, what would happen for you? This presentation is for you if you want to finish your dissertation quickly and well. There's lots of people out there in the world that will say that they will help you finish your dissertation quickly. And the caution that I always throw out to people who hear that type of message is that it shouldn't be just quickly. It needs to be quickly and well, because well is what finishes. Well is what defends well. And so that's what I want for you. This presentation is also for you. If you want to move on with your professional and personal life, just like my lovely bride and I, we got to the altar, we got married, but the reality was that I wasn't done with my doctorate. And so I had a journey to go through still. What would happen if that part of your journey, your doctoral journey, finally was able to come to a close? What would be available to you? And if you want to cut through the clutter of information and get a clear roadmap forward, this presentation's for you. Are you interested? Well, then let's get to it, shall we? So, by the end of this talk, you will most definitely have a clear roadmap of how to finish your dissertation literature review and know the steps that you need to take on a very foundational level to finish your literature review in less time than if you were just left to your own devices. So, to start us off today, I just want to tell you in general what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about really how to know exactly what needs to go into a literature review. I don't want you to waste time looking for material to go in your literature review, and I don't want you to waste time writing your literature review. So we're going to be discussing that. We're going to talk about how to actually get the information that you're seeking and organize it so good that the writing becomes really the secondary activity. The writing is the easiest part of this. So after you gathered the materials, the writing becomes the easiest part. That's what we're going to be discussing in the middle of this presentation. And also, we're going to be talking about how can you communicate with your chair and your committee about your literature review that will actually minimize the chance that they're going to ask you for a revision of some kind. And if you've ever had the experience of getting what I call a left hook from a committee member, that is, someone brings in this strange idea that you have to integrate into your paper, that can cost you months and sometimes years of time. So I want to show you a way of minimizing the opportunity for that. So my promise is that I'll be giving you the best that I can give you today, and that at the end of this conversation, I'm going to give you the information that you need to take this further if you'd like to go further. So I'm going to give you lots of great stuff here, and then we'll take it forward. So with that, let's talk about this first major topic that we'll be discussing in this presentation today, of what needs to go into a literature review. Really, this is the cure for wasting your valuable time. If you imagine the literature review, if you know what exactly needs to go inside of a literature review in a very detailed way, then you won't waste any time finding that material and putting it into your dissertation. It's so important not to waste time. And the literature review really is just a collection of some very specific information organized in a specific way, which we'll be discussing. And if you are able to gather that material and put it in there quickly, then it's not going to be such a big deal. But without the proper guidance and without knowing what you're looking for, you can spin and write a draft of a literature review. It can be 50 pages long, but it's still going to miss the mark. And really, what it all comes down to is knowing what to get and where to get it. And if you know what to get and where to get it for your literature review, you're going to be in a great spot. Far more of a good spot than the person who just goes and writes 50 pages. Because that's not the goal of this, to write 50 pages. The goal is to create something very specific. And a lot of people don't know what needs to go into a literature review. And so that's where we need to begin today. So, really to start, most candidates make the mistake of sitting down to write a dissertation. And they just sit there and they write. Specifically, when it comes to the literature review, most doctoral candidates make the mistake of thinking that the number one task of writing a literature review is to write one. And what I want to say to you is that that is the least productive way you could go about writing a literature review. If you are just sitting down at your desk or at a table or wherever you sit, and you are cracking open books and typing them into a Microsoft Word document that you call your literature review, that is the least productive way of producing your literature review, only second to you sitting there in a library or classroom playing Candy Crush Saga. That makes no sense. Clearly, there's a step. There's a step before writing your literature review called the literature search. And if you don't search, that is, you don't engage in a gathering step, you don't gather all the materials that you need for your literature review first, what you'll find is that you'll just spin in the writing. You might be able to write 50 pages, or you might not, but it's not going to produce the type of literature review that actually will muster going through a committee, a quality review process, an IRB, or even defending. And that's the worst one. If you actually get through a proposal, you present your proposal, you advance to candidacy, you get everything done, and all of a sudden you get near oral defense, and then something goes wrong there. We don't want that to happen. We want you to be able to write something that really, on the first or second attempt, quickly gets through. And if you just knew what needs to go in there, it would be much easier. And really what the starting point here is that you must first engage in a gathering step. Most people, when they sit down to the dissertation project, don't realize that a dissertation really is a maze of nuanced, connected sections. The different sections feed other sections. From the outside, it almost looks like a dissertation is a chronological document written from chapters 1 to chapter 5. And really, that's not true. Certain sections are built directly using components of others. So, for example, there's like brother-sister sections where they're almost like twins. So, for example, your research questions, for example, often get copied directly, verbatim, between all different sections of your literature review. Brothers and sisters, tend to mimic one another in their behavior. And so chapters 1, for example, and chapter 2, there's a mimicry that occurs between those two chapters. There's mother-son sections, that is, mothers give birth to sons, and some sections of your literature review give birth to others. And if you just knew really this arrangement of which sections feed other sections, you'd see that there's really some initial steps that you must conduct before you go and you jump into the writing phase of a literature review. So really, what it starts with is you begin with your purpose statement. You and your chair need to come to a complete agreement before anything else of what your purpose statement is. If your purpose statement is unsteady, if you cannot say that this is your final draft purpose statement, then there's really no point in moving forward. We first need to hone that down, because the purpose statement really defines the variables or the theory areas that you'll be working with in your dissertation. And those theory areas or the variables actually end up feeding chapter 2 in the sense that they actually define what historical periods and what historical background we need to be researching. So for example, if your purpose statement, I won't make one up now, but if your purpose statement dealt with high school activities directors and you were looking at leadership behaviors, you'd want historical background about activities directors, and you'd want historical background about leadership behaviors, these two different pieces. So you'd have two different major pieces in your literature review. And what goes into a literature review? What are you gathering? Well, you're gathering all research from the past. All research from the past. And it is placed and is organized in a chronological order. There's this fake, a falsehood. There's a falsehood floating out there that a literature review only can have sources that are like less than 5 years old. Well, that's not exactly true. When it comes to mentioning the most current research, yes, you most definitely need to include the most recent research that comes from these different theory areas. But the reality is a literature review is all the research, it's all the findings, it's all the history of a time period going back to the times of yore all the way to the present. So we need to find those seminal documents, that's what they're called, to actually give us hints about where all this started. And then you work up to today's research and specifically what those researchers recommend that we study. So notice what we have here is one, we start from the purpose statement, which defines these theory areas. But really what I want you to get out of this slide is that we start with the most recent, we start with the oldest research, the oldest historical documentation about a specific area of interest like leadership or high schools, things like this. And we work forward to the most current study. And so really what needs to happen is we need to gather all of those materials. So do you see how big the literature review really is? Do you see how the gathering step is really the biggest step? Because if we're gathering all the research, as much as we can that is, from way back to the present, then the writing part is really only a secondary piece. If during my second year of my doctoral journey, if someone had told me that, my activity as a dissertation person would be much different. Rather than sitting there trying to write chapters 1 and 2 over and over again, trying to make progress of some kind and only finding myself bored and distracted, I would know that my job was to actually go and gather the oldest information out there. When my wife and I, we both were working on our dissertations around the same time, we ended up just sitting in the same, we'd sit in our house and we'd just work. We'd work. And over time, I realized that had I just organized and gathered the material ahead of time, what would have ended up happening is I would have been able to write a literature review much quicker. The gathering step became the most important step, because when you gather the information, when you gather all the information first, then what ends up happening is the writing becomes the secondary thing. Because quite often you might have had the experience of writing a literature review, and then all of a sudden you realize, wow, I really don't know where this thing fits, like where I found this thing, some kind of quotation in the source, and I don't know where this quotation fits. If you're finding yourself experiencing that as you're writing, something's gone seriously wrong. I was able to quickly manifest and create a literature review because of the fact that I had actually actually gathered all the materials ahead of time. And then I was able to put them in a specific order and put them together. What ended up happening, of course, is that things finished fast. I was able to finish a draft I was able to submit proposal quite quickly, and I was able to finish the entire dissertation process really when I sat down to start working on it, really in full, with a full effort. I wasn't playing with the dissertation. I actually was writing it for real. It took less than 9 months to do it. And I just want to say, I can't tell you exactly the sense of accomplishment that I had sitting with my friends and my family at my doctoral graduation and experiencing what it felt like to truly be done. Not just done with coursework, but completely done. And that the doneness, though a lot of people helped me along the way, the doneness really was a result of my hard work and me using smart ways of working to actually get ahead. And that's why you're watching this presentation, I hope, is because you want to work hard, but you're looking for a smart way of getting ahead. If you had the information ahead of time of what you needed to put into a literature review, how could that change your process going forward? There's such a sense of accomplishment that you will feel when you finally graduate. And I'm so happy you're here investing the time to actually get there. So the question then, really, if really the first step in a literature review is to gather the right materials, then the question really then becomes, how do I get that information? How do I find the information that I'm looking for? How do I gather it in the first place? And then how do I organize it in such a way that it would allow me to write a literature review in a first or second draft quite quickly? And I mentioned the second draft because you can write the best literature review out there, but your chair and your committee are still going to have some input into what you've included, and chances are you might make an APA error somewhere and you might have to change it. So when I say writing a great literature review on the first try, that's my hope, is that you'll be able to write a great literature review on the first try. Many of you that are watching this might have already written a literature review. And the hope is that revisions are small, because when revisions are big, that can cost many months or years of life. So our goal is to organize the material ahead of time. So you have some idea now of what you're looking for. We know that the purpose statement gives birth to theory areas or variables. So think about your purpose statement, if you have one. What are the big areas of your literature, or of your purpose statement? Are there one, two, or probably two or three areas that your literature review will need to cover because your purpose statement mentions those, right? So for example, if we're talking about high school activities directors and we're talking about leadership behaviors, those are two different things. We know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for historical documents and up to current research about activities directors, and I'm looking for historical up to current research documents about leadership behaviors. But that's only a small piece of it. Now that I actually know what I'm looking for, unless I know how to go out and look for those materials and how to actually gather them and organize them, that's really only a small part of the battle. And so really this entire section of this presentation is talking to you about how do you go about gathering this material and organizing it. And for me, the metaphor of building a house is very valuable. I want you to imagine that you're for some reason you're building a house, and you might not have any building experience, but that doesn't matter. This is a metaphor. I want you to picture there's a vacant lot, and it's your job to build a house. And what you do is you start building this house piece by piece. But here's the catch, is that every time you need a new piece, you have to run to the local do-it-yourself store to go gather that piece. Can you imagine how long it would take to build that house? You're laying the cement for the foundation. You're like, oh, I need a hose to go, to wet the cement. So you run and you go and you get a hose. Then you come back and you're like, oh, wait, I need a trowel to actually smooth out the cement. I'm going to run back to the store and I'm going to go get it. You get the idea. I mean, you make so many trips back and forth to the store that you're going to be spending most of your time tripping to the store than you are actually building the house. And quite similar to that, there's many of you, there's many literature review writers. You might have the experience of feeling like you get to a section of your literature review and you run back to the store. That is, you run back to your research online or to some books and you try to figure out what goes next. Can you imagine how slow the literature review writing process goes if you keep having to run back and forth to online resources, online research, back to your books, then to your document, and back and forth, that is a complete waste of time. So naturally, the best way to build a house probably is to gather all the materials ahead of time before you build it. So that way they're all sitting in the yard waiting for you to build that house. And think about it from the literature review perspective. What if you gathered all the materials you needed for the literature review first, and then you started to write the literature review? Most of us think that writing a literature review is a writing task, and it's not a writing task. The literature review is a reviewing task. It's a searching task. It's you on your own searching and reviewing personally the literature. The written portion of literature review is just you reporting out in an organized way what you've found. So where do you go then to get your materials? If you are going to engage in the step of gathering all your materials first into the yard before you build this house called a literature review, what do you need to focus on? And for the people that I work with, that I coach, one-on-one, the people that I work with in seminar, or if you're one of those people that is one of my dissertation candidates, I'm your chair or I'm one of your committee members, I always emphasize this, that really there are some sources that are more useful than others. And quite often, literature review writers take they actually flip this over, and that's where they get into trouble, is they're focusing on gathering the wrong things. The first thing you should be looking for are books. You should be focusing on gathering the best, most notable books in the theory area that you're researching. So let's say leadership is something that you're researching. Rather than going to the most latest documents or articles about leadership, I want you to find the oldest books that you possibly can and the newest books, and I want you to find all the books from all the different time periods of or regarding leadership. And the reason why is because articles are often born from researchers and from books and from journal articles and dissertations. It's these things, books typically come first in the order of things. If you think about all the amazing books that have been written about leadership lately, if you're into that sort of thing, those books came from somewhere. And most likely the content of those books is built off previous books. So you want to gather those books first. Second are dissertations. There's lots of doctoral candidates like you out there that are writing dissertations about similar topics, and they could probably guide you, those dissertations can guide you towards sources that would be useful to you. Clearly you cannot copy from them, but you can definitely get a guide to where they found their resources, so they can lead you to further resources. Journal articles are also useful, but in my opinion, they're the least useful when we're writing a comprehensive literature review, because journal articles are really the research, typically what's happening now, and that's important. And every single literature review, every section of a literature review typically ends with talking about the most recent research. But really, you want to start with the books. You want to start with the oldest and work your way to the present. Just get all the major books for your theory area from all time periods. And then you get dissertations, and then you get journal articles. And then there's other print articles like magazines, newspapers. But those aren't scholarly resources most of the time. So really that's the last thing that should be on your mind. Now, what do you do with these? When you get them, there's a process. So it's almost like you process them in. You're taking them in, and then you're doing something with them, and then you're processing them out. You're sending these resources back, or you're organizing them if it's something you get to keep. So what do you do? First thing, right when you get your any of these things, a book, a dissertation, a journal article, whatever, I want you to immediately photocopy the copyright page and or title page. Usually the copyright page is the most useful because it has the title and it has the year, which is so important. It might even have an ISBN number if it's a book that's been written in the last many decades. And you also want to copy the works cited page of all those documents right away. Because what happens? Two things. Number one is we lose things as we're doing a dissertation, as you're writing one, and so you need to have the title page, so that way you have all the citation, the copyright page, so that way you have all the citation information that you need for writing your works cited page and properly citing your sources. But the works cited page, why would you copy the works cited page of a book or a dissertation? Well, because they are going to tell you where to find other information about your topic. In fact, most dissertation writers are suddenly shocked. The first time they get a great book into their hands, they go to the works cited page, and that works cited page could list hundreds of other works that are related to the same stuff that you're researching. So wouldn't it be useful to know what other people have looked at and are looking at, so that way you can forward your own search as well? Isn't this useful to go through this here? Now, it's an assembly line. That's what you need to start. Everything needs to be a process. What I hope you've kind of gathered is that if you go back and forth between tasks, that's where you lose time. Things don't work very well if you're going back and forth doing tasks over and over, because it actually, the changing of task is actually what wastes time. So if you do like tasks at like times, that is, you group similar tasks together, you do only one thing at a time, you're going to have things move quite more smoothly, and things are going to happen much more fast. So what you do is you get sources into your inbox. Now, I highly recommend actually having an inbox, an actual cardboard box, a milk crate, a cart, something, and you receive your sources. So if you're fortunate enough to be at a university that does interlibrary loans, this might be your inbox, your email box. You might print things if you're that sort of person. It could be that if your university has a premium interlibrary loan service, that is, they actually ship you books. I was so fortunate to go to a university where they actually would ship me books for free. Then yeah, I would put them in my inbox. I'd order them. When I received them, I put them in my inbox. First thing I do, photocopy the copyright title page and the works cited page, and I would staple those together and put that in a file, which is a totally different story, but the easiest way to do this is just alphabetical by last name of author. What I would do is I'd read the source. So I'd actually, let's say it's a book, I'd read the book. I'd just visually scan the table of contents with my eyes. I'd look through the table of contents and index, and I'd look for the things that I'm looking for, those pertinent topics, theory areas, different information. I'd locate the sections of the text that were applicable. Sometimes what I would do is I'd put in post-it notes to actually allow me, and most of my candidates do this, they use post-it notes of various colors and kinds to go actually put in the book and label the different theory areas. But really what you're doing is a quick scan. And then what you're going to do is you're actually going to read. That's the last step. Is once you've identified the areas of the book that you're actually going to focus on, because you can't read the whole thing, guys. So what you're going to do is you're going to go in, you're going to read, and you're going to decide on at least 5 quotes from this source that are of significant value. You might not know why this source is of significant value to you, but you have a feeling this is something worth writing down. So what you're going to do is you're going to type it into your literature matrix. And the literature matrix is just simply an Excel spreadsheet or a Microsoft Word-based table that you create. You're going to type in a few pieces of pertinent information, which I'll cover momentarily. And then what you're going to do is you're going to type in the quote, type in the citation, and then you're going to process the source in your outbox. That is, you're going to put that book into an outbox, and then you're going to return those sources. So each one of these tasks is separate. What I would say is, get something in your inbox and just focus on doing these steps with that source. This is how to get rid of a source, right? And this is what a literature matrix looks like. Is you have these are the things that all the people that I coach and I work with find most useful. Is we have these different columns here. We have the year column. We have the different type. What is it? A book, an article, a dissertation. The actual citation, full citation. Do it now so you don't have to do it later, and so that way you don't lose your source, or God forbid, forget to cite the source and get accused of plagiarism. You write down the topic of that specific type of source, and then you actually type in the quote. You actually write out the quote, long form, and include the citation if you possibly can. Make sure you always include the page numbers in your literature matrix when you're doing a direct quote. And frankly, always include the page number in your literature matrix, so that way you have that information in the future. So this is what it should look like. So that's what the process looks like. And so, for me, my process was, I just noticed there's some beer there in that picture. What I did was I bought some water. I love Pellegrino. And so what I would do is I shipped all that, shipped it. I went to the store, grabbed it, and I had rented an office space. In fact, rented is not even fair to say. My father-in-law, God bless him, gave me use of one of his offices. And so what I was able to do is I just took all that water, and there's lots of restaurants around his office, so I just went there, and I would work, between 6 and 8 hours a day, a couple days a week at least, to work on this literature review process. And so what you're seeing in front of you, like on the right-hand side here, is me processing books in. What I'm doing is I've received all those books, or I've gone to the library. You see my cart there. I've brought these books directly here. And then what I'm doing is right there is I'm looking at the title page, I'm scanning it, I'm copying the works cited page, and then I'm processing forward. And what ends up happening is over time, and this is a little bit crazy, this is the method that I recommend. This is old school, but man, it works. Is what I do is I type out my literature matrix. And what my candidates often do, and what you're seeing here, I think is some candidates' work. And what you do is you actually take your literature matrix, you print it out long form, you cut it up into little strips of paper, and then you organize it. And what you end up with is just these lists and lists of sources that actually fit with one another. And it's like you might have 3 sentences that say the same thing, but they say the same thing from 3 different sources. That means you've synthesized the work together, right? And then you're taping it all. What I do is I would tape it all together. And what this candidate did clearly is he taped it all together, and then he put it onto some paper, and then he put it up on the wall. And this is a literature review in process. This is what the gathering we've gone from gathering at this point. They're done with the gathering. Now we're in the organizing step. They're organizing. And then finally, the last step is to actually type it out. So your brain is probably spinning a little bit. So this last part here we're not going to spend much time on, but it is by far one of the most important things we can discuss. One of the top 3 things we can discuss is how can you communicate with your dissertation chair and your committee in such a way that revisions are minimized. The key is that whenever you're working with another human being, they can sense that if you communicate with them in the wrong way, they can sense that maybe you're not ready to move forward. And so when you are ready, we want to make sure that you're communicating with your chair and your committee members in such a way that communicates, I'm ready, I'm moving forward, versus I'm confused, right? I don't know what to do. So let's get into this a little bit and talk about what I mean. I want you to imagine for a second that you're a dissertation chair, that you've graduated, you've moved on, and that someone's actually asked you to be a dissertation chair, and you work perhaps for a university or something like this. And this email is what you receive, and I'll read it to you, right? Dr. John, how's it going? Hey, I know we haven't talked for about a year since the fire. My cats are fine now, but man, I'm stressed. I've not been doing much writing until yesterday, but I was able to finish 20 pages in 2 hours. Wow, I'm ready to graduate now. Let me know what you think of my dissertation. See attached. Later. Signed, Naive Doctoral Learner. Just imagine if you're a chair, and this guy or this gal here has been off the map for like a year, right? We haven't heard from him in a year, and all we're hearing is that he hasn't been doing his writing well, and that all of a sudden he feels like he's made significant gains in a very short amount of time. Doesn't this seem a little, aren't you just skeptical just listening to it? If the guy says he finished his dissertation and he hasn't been heard from in some time, and if he finished 20 pages in 2 hours, what's that even mean? Now, you might not ever write an email like this to your doctoral chair, but elements of this you might actually be communicating in your communication. Notice, for example, that there's been a lack of communication, and you're kind of doing the whole catch-up thing. When you're playing catch-up with your chair, that's probably a bad sign. communicating that not much writing has been done, and telling that life's been getting in the way. And just notice how, as a doctoral chair or dissertation chair, you could be thinking, okay, but what's going to happen from that? I mean, life does happen, and chairs know that, but just feel that, what it feels like for a chair. And there's kind of the finality of it, like I've made sudden progress and I'm ready to go. That doesn't always seem like a sure footing. It's almost like you want a clear, like strong foundation, and then all of a sudden, if there's progress, it's always best if it seems like it's come from a strong place as opposed to a sudden like place, right? And just notice that what's this even asking, right? Let me know what you think of my dissertation. That's not a request that we make of chairs or of committee members. There's some specific things we want to communicate to each one of these, and that's what I want to say is that if you communicate the wrong way to a dissertation chair or a committee member, that unsureness can be very revealing of where you are. You never want to lie to a doctoral chair or a committee member, but what I want to say is you want to communicate strength and strongness and where you are, and communicate directly. The way that you communicate with them says a lot about you and where you are. Let's look at each one of these statements. If you said, could you look at this draft and see what you think? Am I done? Notice, this is an actual email that I've received personally, something at least paraphrased like this. And notice that what it communicates is this question of am I done, right? Well, you tell me, right? You're the person writing the dissertation. Are you done or are you not done? And how long do you think it would take for me to finish? This is an actual question that I've received numerous times from different doctoral candidates that I'm their chair or their committee member. Now, the people that I coach and the people that come to my seminar would never, ever ask this question because it's not a good question to ask. Because, of course, the obvious answer is whenever you finish, right? Communicating, I'm lost. What do I do next? Remember, this is your dissertation process and project. It's okay to feel lost. It's okay to communicate this feeling of lostness. And yet, where's the ownership? The ownership, is it on the chair or on the committee member, or is it on the doctoral learner, the person writing the dissertation, to make some suggestions about how to move forward and how to get unlost? So just notice the unsettling feeling that all these statements have. And we want to avoid these, right? And in my opinion, we want to communicate strength. We want to communicate where we are and make a direct request of the person that we're working with. So this is an example of, I think, an ideal email. And it sounds like this. I've worked very hard for these past weeks to hand you a polished draft. I think that we are ready to move forward towards formal proposal or, advancement to candidacy, whatever you call it at your university. As you can see, it's as my final draft. It says this draft is as final draft quality as I possibly could create. I respect your time, so whatever you see here is the best I have to offer. Probably at this time, right? I'm ready for your input and to take action quickly. I'm poised to make my formal proposal presentation and start collecting data. And look at that draft. I love paper. I always recommend sending paper to your committee if possible. What you see here in this picture is you don't see like a Word document that says Chapter 1. No, this is a printed document that is laid out like a dissertation. It includes all the table of contents, all the front matter pages. It includes all the tables, it includes the reference pages, it includes everything. And look, it's even tabbed for easy reading, is clipped together, and looks just like this hulking 1 or 2 inch thick stack of papers. And it feels like it's final. And naturally, you don't want to do this if you're not feeling this way. You want to get to a point where you actually have something substantive to offer your doctoral chair and your committee. But just notice the sureness that's in this. As a dissertation writer, that you're ready to submit. And that's the goal of all your work, is to actually get to a place where you feel like you're ready to go. And imagine you're in this position, right? Where you're able to communicate, look, this is how ready I am. You send each one of your committee members a paper copy of your finished proposal ready to go. IRB application attached, fully filled out with little tabs of where they can sign. And what they get there with an introduction letter from you saying how sure you feel that you're ready to move forward, if truly you are, and that you can even communicate to them, look, I'm already poised to collect my data. I have all my survey instruments ready to go, or at least I have my envelopes stamped and ready to go, and things like this. And just notice the power and the sureness that communicates to your committee if you're ready to take that step, versus, what do you think about my writing? Notice the difference of how that feels. And so that's what you want to communicate with your chair is really, where are you? No matter what step you're in of the dissertation process, where are you in the process and what are your plans? Keep it short, keep it direct, and just simply say what you'd like to accomplish, where you're ready to head next. And if you're ready to move to proposal, tell them that you feel like you're there. For me, being able to reach that point of finishing was probably the top 5 moments of my life. I have children now, so the top 3 are really easily taken by me getting married and having these wonderful kids. But being able to graduate close to the same time around that my wife graduated, 2 doctors working with one another. What a cool thing. And I just want you to imagine, what would it be like to sit in that position yourself? What would it be like to be able to finally finish and move forward? My hope today is that you've learned some amazing tools, things that you can apply in your own dissertation journey. And I just want to quickly tell you how you can take what you've learned today and apply it moving forward. Specifically, as you can see by if you have not already done this, I just want you to notice that there's some URLs at the top here and the bottom, thedissertationmentor.com. I recommend you browse there and you sign up for my free information and you continue to receive those. I encourage you to set a goal of processing at least 5 sources a week. That is, getting 5 books or 5 dissertations or 5 articles a week. And from each of those, I'd like you to get 5 quotes from each of those. So 5 quotes times 5 sources, that's 25 quotes a week. And if you were to keep that step, you would have around 400 quotes after about somewhere between 15 and 20 weeks. And that's a good number in getting ready to write a dissertation. It's around 400 great quotes or sources. Now, you're definitely not going to direct quote all of those, but those are the necessary pieces. I would encourage you to build an environment in which you can write your dissertation, and if you can, spend as much time there as you possibly can each week. And I say if you can, I mean, gosh, if you can spend 6 to 8 hours there 3 days a week, that's golden. And I encourage you to put your dissertation project first in your day if you can. Give your first energy to your first priorities. And if your dissertation is one of your first priorities, give your energy there. So again, I'm Dr. Guy, and it's been a pleasure working with you today and presenting this to you. And my hope is that you'll look at thedissertationmentor.com and continue your doctoral journey moving forward. And let me know what you think of this video. Below there's a comment field. Please leave me some comments. What was useful of this video? And how could I have improved it? And what are some ideas that you're going to be using going forward from this point? Again, thank you.